Jon Jones came out, and Jon Jones said, I'm tired of 205 pounds. I think I'm going to move up to heavyweight, or I'm going to wait for the DC and the Stipe. Francis Ngannou came forward, and he said, why don't we just fight? Why don't we just do a super fight? Now, I was a little light on this because, again, I'm trying to guess what it is that's going to make Jon tick. You got to follow the golden rule. The golden rule is put yourself in somebody else's shoes. What would you do? I don't imagine if we were champions and we had an opportunity to leave our championship behind, no longer be the champion. We're just going to give it up. Or what are we going to give it up for? Not a championship opportunity. Just a big fight, which is what Ngannou would be for Jon. I just wanted to imagine that that's something that we, following the golden rule, would elect to do. And therefore, we shouldn't think that Jon wants to do it. Well, Jon's surprising us a little bit because he seems open to the idea. Jon Jones appears, at least publicly, at least right now, that he is open to the idea of vacating 205, going up to heavyweight, taking on Francis, with a caveat, obviously, and I think it probably does not need stated, but the caveat would be when I get done with Francis and I am successful, I go right into the winner of Stipe Cormier. We've all been told, and accurately so, it is good information, that Daniel Cormier's next fight will be his last fight. So his match with, so whenever we're talking about the winner of Stipe versus Cormier to take on Jon Jones, it's really not quite that easy. If Daniel beats Stipe, and we know that he can do it because he has done it, the belt then becomes vacant. So what do? Yeah, you put Jon Jones in there. Sure, he's got the paper behind him to do it. Then do you run Stipe back in there for a championship that he just lost? Yeah, probably. But one of the most successful heavyweights of all time. But that would be the situation. And I do think that if Jon was to get ahead of this thing and say, look, going up and taking on Francis is a bigger fight, whether it's a championship fight or not, it is a much bigger fight than anything I got going at 205 right now. I would be surprised, and I think I would be pleasantly surprised. I think that that would really show something. I think to go up and take on a heavyweight that nobody else wants to fight. By the way, when you start breaking down the X's and O's of Francis and Jon Jones, it starts to be pretty fun. There's no question who the better fighter is. It's Jon Jones. That doesn't mean he's going to beat Francis. You've got a meaningful size problem there. You've got an athleticism to deal with. But you've got a real power. And who's going to beat Jon Jones is likely somebody who can knock him out. It's likely not to be somebody that's better than him. It's likely not to be somebody that can go 25 minutes with him and have to win a judge's decision based on output of the fight and positions. It's likely going to be somebody who's not as good but hits really hard and catches that big shot. I mean, that's likely what it is. And when you're dealing with Jon Jones, he has put himself in a position where there is such a gap between him and the competition that people know how the story is going to end, and therefore they are less likely to buy a ticket. You just are. How many times do you read a book if you already know how the book ends? How many times do you go see a movie that you already know how it ends? It's one of those things that it happens in sport. And it's not always fair. I always would go back to the Roy Jones Jr., the greatest boxer of the entire decade, called the 90s. But he never had that huge fight. Not one, let alone 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, like a Mayweather or a De La Hoya or a Sugar Ray. Other guys that controlled entire decades, Mike Tyson's 10 big, huge mega fights. Roy didn't have any, none, because he was so good. He did everything right. He looked the part. He fought the part. He was a showman. He talked the talk. But nobody came up to help him. Same as guys did to Demetrius. Demetrius took all the blame in that division when Demetrius did his job. He couldn't get a contender to do theirs. It's a tough spot. In large part, it's a tremendous compliment to Jon and what he has accomplished, but it's still a tough spot. And he would solve that problem. Parity is a real thing. The fact that he's cleaned out a division, well, he's been there for over a decade. Yeah, you're going to clean it out at some point. You stay there long enough. Parity is a real thing. Just moving a guy a weight class, bringing in names and faces and ideas and matchups that you had never even conceived. You've never even played with those ideas before. It could be very good. It could be very fresh. It could be very exciting. And if Jon went up to do that, to take a contenders fight in a different division, which tells us he's going to stick around, which lets us look forward to what's going to be next, which is likely going to be Stipe, we could have some real fun. And I think that's exactly what Jon Jones needs us to have right now.